Hello, Reg audience. Today there's going to be frequent swearing, violence and scenes of a sexual nature. So it's just another day at Register Editorial. However, here in the studio we are building the perfect flexible worker. So we can leave them to do whatever it is that they do, and we can do some useful stuff for you. So what we're going to do today is to talk about the practicalities of flexible working. A lot of people talk about all the technology around with it and start with that first. And as we know, that doesn't always go entirely straightforwardly. So hopefully this is going to be helpful for you. Now, as you know, I'm Tim Phillips, there from the Register, and I better introduce the other people in the studio with me today. So at the far end of the table is Tim Stone from Cisco. Tim, welcome. It's always terrific to have another Tim in the studio.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Now, Tim, how much time do you spend out the office these days?
Well, I'm probably quite a typical flexible worker, actually, a mobile worker. I spend a couple of days working at home, the rest of the time either in the office and often travelling in Europe, as I have a European marketing job at Cisco, Marketing Collaboration Technologies.
So when you're out of the office, here's the thing now, I've got to ask this. When you're out of the office, do people mess around and move stuff and leave dirty stuff on your desk?
Well, actually, in the offices we have over near Heathrow at Cisco, we have a flexible desk policy. So the idea is that each person clears their desk at the end of the day and ready for the next person to use it. So that's the way we work. We try and put a discipline around having hot desking and free offices for people to use.
Well, this is good. People are just respectful of your personal space, though.
Yeah, although we do tend to get the odd person who tries to grab an office desk if they are in the office every day. So we do have some people who like their territory.
I just like to say, people are respectful of his space. If there's anyone from the Reg, they don't leave stuff on his desk when he's not in the office. That's all I'm saying. Sorry, also with us today, from Freeform Dynamics, it's our old mate, Andy Buss, the only analyst named after a mode of transport. Hello, Andy Buss, welcome back.
It's a pleasure, as usual.
Now, tell me, you're never in the office, are you, Andy? You're always off at these sort of flash, conferences and things like those.
Well, absolutely, and if not, I'm at home with my feet up on my desk, because that's where I work. So I am actually one of these types of flexible workers, anywhere, anytime, any device. I live and breathe it.
Bit more, put a bit more effort in. We need some new slides from you. Yeah, OK. Right now, let's have a look. Why are we here? Well, because, as I said, it's good to be practical about this. And the problem is the flexible workers you got at the moment probably aren't really the flexible workers you need. It's not their fault very often when they started in the job. This wasn't really expected of them. Suddenly it's been landed on top of them. Or the job's changed, and they have to change with it. So we're going to talk about how we build the best possible workers. Now, what we call the housekeeping in the business is ask some questions. You can see above my head here, there's a little button that helps you ask questions. You got a question, it's on your mind, ask it, because if you don't ask it and then complain afterwards, it's your fault, it's not mine. You can download the slides. We've got some nice slides today. With numbers and figures and graphs on them. So you might want to download those as well. Give us some feedback at the end. Wait until the end for that. Don't give us feedback straight away. But do please get in touch. If any of you were at Reg Live earlier this week in the audience, and let us give me a bit of feedback on how that went, because it was a terrific day actually, guys. And it is any of your international viewers who weren't at Reg Live. Sorry, it's a bit of a long way to come. But it is one of the few reasons to actually live in the UK, is to get to see the Register performing live. Right, now let's get on with this. Now, Tim, this is one of yours. You've done a lot of research on this. I guess you've got a lot of interest in it because you've got quite a big financial stake in the whole mobile worker business, haven't you, at Cisco?
Yeah, well, one of the things we do is we like to understand the end users as much as we can. So we often commission studies, and this Connected World report ask the opinions of users and workers in enterprise companies. Amazing statistic that 66% of the respondents said that they would exchange a job with, or they'd accept a job with lower pay in exchange for flexible working, mobility, and interestingly, choice of device, so things like iPads, Android devices, and also the use of social media tools in the workplace. So giving people the tools and the way of working is now becoming really important to attract and retain the staff that you want. So fascinating findings from this report.
It is. You've got a good-looking bunch of users here. And but Andy Buss, do you think that's actually true from what we know of reg readers? They're going to accept less money?
Well, I think
for an iPad?
this is a statement of intent rather than what people would actually do. But I think it is a reflection on where things are heading, that there is a lot more influence around what the end user is wanting to achieve and how they want to do it. And it's a new type of workforce coming in. Companies these days aren't really geared up towards actually giving people these flexible roles just yet. A lot of the research we've done shows that actually they're quite behind the times when it comes to actually putting this in place. So it's about planning for the future and what the workforce will be doing over the next 10, 15 years. But it's like an avalanche of change coming.
Yeah, duty now for the future. So, yeah, an avalanche of change, it's a scary kind of word, isn't it? Just a quick early question, Tim, before we get going. Someone was asking, where do you put your files when you clean your desk?
Well, all my files are on my laptop, so I don't actually have any physical files in my workspace.
You don't have a big bunch of paper and stuff like that the rest of us carry around?
I don't know.
I've actually started doing all of my printing onto my iPad, so I'm actually almost given up printing completely now. So I just PDF it and it's available.
It's another world. Let us know if you do the same thing. It's another world for me, I have to say. I still have to carry around an inch thick of paper that I can't find anything on. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe that's more about me, isn't it? OK, now, Andy Buss, this is the problem that you've encapsulated here in a picture of some small offices and people jumping up and down. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so if we start really towards the left is what we've really started to get now is a lot more flexibility in the workplace. Companies are looking to reduce their overall cost of things like facilities, buildings, rent, heat, etc. Think of it just as we virtualize data centers, it's about virtualizing the workspace. So why have big, massive offices where people have fixed desks that you pay for and they're there 30% of the time? Why not have good hot desks where you make 80, 90% utilization of the space? Really cuts down on those extra expenses around employing people. It means you can actually employ more people to do productive work than having space sitting around generating nothing. So that's one aspect of flexible working.
That's the idealised version of it. That's where we'd like to be.
It is, and that can only be enabled, though, if we can actually have flexible workers who can work out of the office, at home or on the road. And so what we are seeing now is that we've got capable devices, so we've got very good notebooks, good phones, good tablet, for example, coming through, and crucially, connectivity. So we've got 3G, Wi-Fi, and also good broadband, and that's enabling systems to be put in place that can get people out of the office and doing work and being in contact, collaborating and communicating. And that really is the key to enabling both flexible use of real estate plus having workers available to be productive wherever they are.
This does. I mean, we're going to get on to complexity in a second, but to lead into that, Tim, it does create a problem, doesn't it? Because a few years ago on this slide, we'd have put a laptop because there's nothing else you could have done your work on.
Yeah, well, just building on what Andy was saying there, in the office I work in, we have 1.7 times the employees that we do desks, which we, obviously, if you have one desk per employee, then, by moving to a more flexible way of working, I mean, not everybody has to hot desk. Some people, let's say, going back to the previous question on filing systems, if you're in accounts, perhaps you'll have a fixed desk. In fact, we have communal storage areas of filing cabinets if some people do want to keep paper. I mean, work is something you do, not a place you go to. So at any one time during a working day, we have up to 20,000 people, believe it or not, VPN'd into the Cisco network. So we have 70,000 employees. So that means during any point in time, anywhere up to 20,000 people are working remotely during the day. So that just gives you a scale of the change that we've implemented in our organisation. But looking at the devices, I mean, there's been an explosion in different non-PC devices. In fact, smartphones and tablets are outstripping the sales now. of PCs. Android has really exploded in the last few years from nowhere to there's around 350,000 activations a day of Android as an operating system, and it's the number one operating system. And I also saw a report this week saying that that Apple will become the number one, let's call it PC manufacturer, overtaking HP in Q4 this year as expected. So we're moving to this sort of post-PC era, as some people are calling it, where these smartphones, tablets, and other devices are becoming very prevalent.
I guess another Cisco question. Then what's your mix? How prescriptive are you about this sort of thing? Can anyone plug stuff into the Cisco network if they want to?
Yes, well, we've got around 10 different models of mobile phones. There's a few that Cisco provide, but other people can bring their devices in. We enforce security onto those devices, so you have to have a password. If you want to use your own iPhone or Android device, you have to have a password so that we can lock or kill the device if it gets lost to protect company data. People can bring iPads in. Again, we enforce security on that device. It's one of the rules, otherwise you can't connect to the network. We also will provide Macs to people now, so you can either have a Lenovo PC or a Mac. And it's up to around 20,000 employees have Mac devices. But the interesting thing is that side is self-supported. So if you choose a Windows PC, IT support it. If it's a Mac, it's self-supported through a wiki that the employees have created. So people support the device themselves. And apparently the support from there is, probably IT won't like me saying this, is as good, if not better, than support from IT.
What proportion of Cisco guys now have Macs, do you think?
Well, the last numbers I saw, it's around 20,000 out of the 70,000 employees. So
it's a
growing
good number.
proportion.
So
yeah.
At what stage, again, maybe do the PCs move to a self-support model as well?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess we've got all the legacy and the support pages and the engineers to support the PCs, which is still dominant. But, yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, maybe it will always be self-supported in the future, which obviously can help with streamlining IT costs.
And I probably have a very burning question as well. So when you have a ratio of 1.7 times the employees to desks, how do you sort it out when all the desks are taken?
You're late for work, you've got to stand all day, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've not seen that situation happen. One of the reasons people do come to the office is when they've got a customer meeting, obviously. So the bigger issue, actually, is finding a meeting room can be challenging. So we've had to kind of, as we've gone through this process over the last 10 years, is adjust the amount of meeting rooms. I think the other thing is we also have dedicated individual meeting rooms, so people can make private phone calls with their employees or personal calls. But we haven't put enough of those in, so we've had to adjust and put rules around these rooms. So we say, well, you can't be in one of those rooms for more than 2 hours, because some people could camp in there all day.
That's it. They can make it their own little private office. They can,
yeah. So you've got to do a lot around the human aspects. Engage with, we call it WPR, workplace resources. Engage with HR to work on flexible working policies for employees. So there's a whole range of other areas. It's not just an IT issue. Sure. It's a building, facilities, HR issues as well to think about.
But there's a bunch of those questions coming in already, actually. So thanks for that. I've been reading them, and we will answer them. I'll make sure. I'll make sure we do on that. Which means that we have to make sure we get through our preparatory stuff. Now, coming off the back of that, as we said, you've got your complexity slide here, Andy. What do we say about this?
Well, it's just really that we're seeing multiple changes in devices, in where people want to work, who's working, for example, employees, contractors, guests and visitors. And we're also seeing new types of applications that we have to get on top of, manage, deploy and secure. And it just means if we tackle things in the old way, where we assume everyone sits at a desk, it's all self-contained and nicely managed, everything's bound to fail and end in chaos.
And if IT provides all the resources to do that, they can't, because there aren't enough hours in a day, so we end up with these wiki-type
I think if IT tries to be
solutions.
too prescriptive and tries to control everything, they will risk being swamped and outmanoeuvred and outflanked, because what we are seeing is it's like the old days of civil wars and things, where you try to corral people in and control them. They will sneak round the back and do whatever they want. We are finding that behaviour a lot now in the surveys we do, particularly in the Reg audience. Users are very resourceful and know what they want, and they often go out and make it happen. So it's about IT partnering with the business, recognising the need for change and trying to be flexible enough to accommodate it.
Right.
And one of the things around that is quite interesting. I was with the CIO earlier this week. We had a briefing and a dinner with a number of CIOs, and this very typical story is, the executives are bringing in iPads. They're saying to IT, I want these connected. This CIO of a major cable company was telling me that, almost daily he's got employees saying, why can't I connect my Android device? I don't want to use your BlackBerry. I want to use my iPad. So these are the pressures. And, in this particular instance, he was saying, in January, I can't hold the wave back anymore. In January, I'm implementing it. I'm going to allow people to connect. I've got a security policy that I'm implementing so I can manage and kill those devices if need be and manage the security on them. So, it's a tide where I think maybe 5 years ago, IT were obviously bringing a lot of the applications and devices into the company. Now it's senior executives actually driving a lot of the change and putting pressure on IT who are on the back foot in many cases and having to react.
And one of the funny things is as well, it's not just new devices. It's not the phones, it's not the tablets, it's not even Macs in many cases. A big part of the issue is people just working at home on their own equipment, which is Windows PCs. Uh-huh. And it is getting on top of how do you integrate that personal side and make it work for the company securely and nicely. And people, I think, tend to forget that this nice, big, huge pool of PCs is out there because it's so old, so mature, and everyone's so comfortable with using it.
You don't worry about it if we don't ask too many questions. We don't worry what's out there, but perhaps we should. Yeah. Now, before we get on to some of the details, your slide on productivity here, Andy Buss, what's the point of this?
Well, I think it's about not only just trying to get more out of people doing what they do today, which is what you get through maybe just enabling them to be a little bit more flexible and mobile. So you may get an extra hour out of the day of them, but what you really want to do is try and transform the way they work. So rather than having a day that is filled with interruptions and downtime and extend that by an hour, why not do it so that they can completely change the way they work and interact? So Tim mentioned the campus that now has a lot more meeting room for customers. Now that's a lot more sales activity going on that used to be filled up with people in offices. So there's now more opportunity to actually do sales by changing the way that's working. So if we take that a bit further, it's what activities can you do that free up the space or the resources to do more, say, revenue generation or profit generating activities, rather than just trying to cope with the day-to-day administration and routine and extending that by slightly more every day.
So we're not talking about just shunting the work out to, you have to do it with your own central heating on.
Yeah.
And the reward is you get to work in your pyjamas. You see, we can actually see back down into into what you're doing at the moment.
That's if you wear pyjamas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Wearing pyjamas is maybe optimistic. So, it's not just that. We actually have to create a way of working, which I know we'll be going into.
Yeah, and quite often this is something that will happen over time. It's not something that can just click your fingers and it will work, but there are ways to transform the operations of the business to take advantage of the flexibility that comes through the new technology.
Which is what you put on your blob slide here, isn't it? Where should our eyes be drawn, Andy?
So we should be looking towards the top, because these are things that maximise productivity in today's more mobile world. We've pretty much licked a lot of the problems we had in the past of locating how to contact people in a fixed location. So finding phone numbers and where people should be sitting is pretty easy and straightforward. But now people are out and about and on the road, and quite often there's a lot of turnover in companies or virtual teams located in different places. So you don't know who's who and what skills they have. So it's really about finding the right person to contact to get something done, or essentially as well, it's finding the right information to distribute out to people. And we find that these are things that are regarded as critical elements of productivity today, but bizarrely, most companies are actually really bad at making this effective and easy to do, so it takes a long time.
So we're prioritising the wrong things, Tim?
I think in terms of what our experiences are, in terms of, I'm in a marketing team in Europe. We can get overloaded by technology and different people trying to contact us. What we've found is that if we compare pre the economic situation we had in 2008, we put a massive investment in video and web conferencing, and actually we took a large chunk of our travel budget and actually moved it into IT to be able to deploy some of these systems. Interesting little fact is that we did a little survey of some of the guys in marketing in my team, and if you compare before using these technologies and afterwards, we actually increased the amount of productive hours by 100 hours over a year for some of the individuals, but they actually spent 80 hours in that year more with their families at home. So it improved their work-life balance. And the main reason for that is they weren't, coming home late at night on planes, travelling back on a Saturday from a meeting. And, we have to travel to San Jose occasionally in our jobs at Cisco to interact with our colleagues in America. So it's kind of got a double benefit, really. It can improve your work-life balance if you're disciplined around it. And also the company gets more productivity from you. But talking about this slide that Andy has put here, we are seeing more and more leading-edge companies actually changing some of their business processes with these technologies. And a great example is Nottingham University Hospital. And it's a specific example in healthcare, but they're using mobile collaboration tablets which have the ability for nurses to be, instead of being tied to a desk and triaging patients, they can be out on the ward administering care. But they have an application where, out of hours, the nurses on the ward will be requesting doctors. So across the hospital, which is 1 kilometre long and half a kilometre wide, there are 5 doctors who are working out of hours. And out of hours is 75% of the time, actually, because that's in the evenings, weekends, bank holidays and what have you. So they get a request for for a doctor. They can see the skills of the doctors, who's logged on. They can actually see where the doctor is in the hospital because they're holding wireless IP phones which are connected to the network. So then they can allocate a job to a doctor with the right skills in the right location, so the doctor doesn't have to walk 1 kilometre across the environment. And they've actually done an independent accountant, the ACCA, have done a study, and they're estimating that the nurses are going to save 8,000 hours in a year, but interestingly, they think that the stay of some of the patients will reduce and they'll be treated more quickly. So they're expecting a £300,000 saving in efficiencies there as well. So on the top left, some of these, you've got your horizontal productivity gains, but now we're starting to see industry-specific advantages with some of these technologies.
That's the thing. I was actually told by someone who ran a hospital once that the longer you stay, statistically, the longer you stay in hospital for anything, the less chance you have of ever coming out of it again.
Right.
So
makes sense.
That's yes. And actually, what we're going to answer that's what's in the next section is a couple of questions based on that. Actually, Christoph was asking about that. The problems that you have when employees become free agents is that you no longer feel part of a team. There's a social downside to it. And also, Alan's talking about this idea that the companies are sort of kind of pushing costs. You can feel that the company is just saying, I've made the joke about heat your own house now and stay in it, but it is a cost. There is, if the company's saying, don't come in, we don't really want you in, that can also feel like you're being pushed out if you don't feel particularly valued in doing it. You don't feel they're supporting you enough, which sort of leads us on to what we've got in next, your profiles of successful mobile workers. Yeah. This comes from your research, doesn't it, Tim?
Yeah, well, we were very interested in this area, and we commissioned a study, this is a few years ago now, from a company called Pern Candola, and they are one of the UK's leading occupational psychologists. And, this is a little bit, in psychologist speak, so difficult for a technology person to
You're going to explain what some of this is. You're going to tell me which one you are as well.
Well, what they came up with was that we looked at the ideal profile for a mobile flexible worker. And there's a number of key attributes. So stimulation seeker, psychologists speak. So this is somebody who is more extrovert, actually. They draw their energy from other people, interacting with other people, and also with suppliers and customers. They're curious explorers, which means they're creative, open to new ideas, new ways of working, open to new technologies. So they're tough survivors. They're resilient. They work well under pressure. They're emotionally stable. They're disciplined achievers, so they're self-motivated, and they're very conscientious. And they're also independent decision makers, so that, they can make decisions on their own. They work on their own instinct, their own experiences. So in an ideal world, I mean, I know a lot of people out there, obviously, you have your existing workforces, so you need to be aware of these attributes. But if you are recruiting new people, these are some of the ideal traits if somebody is going to be working a lot at home, so you don't get into problems of isolation and motivational problems, with these employees.
Yeah, and I think what this also brings out is there's a whole ton of classifications of people who are not successful mobile.
This is my next question, because when I go to companies, you look around and you think, I see a lot of people have all these attributes, not because the company's got bad people, but because a lot of companies don't really incentivise independent decision-making for a lot of the job.
And also our research shows that they don't invest in training, and it's really a lot of training and skills building that can identify the latent traits and try and develop them so people do become skilled at being mobile workers that can motivate themselves, get things done, and become results-orientated.
So the lesson here is don't train people to use the mobile phone. Tell them to train them how to make the best use of the stuff that they've got.
Yeah, well,
these things.
And things like time management, for example, discipline, interaction with people, getting them to communicate and collaborate. So a lot of the things that people take for granted because they're in an office just fall by the wayside when you work in an isolated manner or at home, and you've got to be encouraged to develop the discipline and the skills needed. And
as an employer, you've got a right to expect this from your employer, I would say, haven't you, really? Rather than just say, go home and do that. You've got a right to say, if you're going to have to do it regularly, help me, train me how to do that.
Yeah, and I think this is, one of the most common questions we get, when we are talking to customers about the technology that we provide is, how am I going to get my users to adopt this? So there's all sorts of creative, things people can do. With some of the technologies we provide marketing campaigns for the organisation to market to their employees to get them to adopt the technology, for example. There's some great examples. Phillips, for example, the major electronics manufacturer, they did a whole marketing campaign to get people to use telepresence and video conferencing because the people were used to travelling, and so they had to market it internally to make sure people were aware how to do it, to make it simple. So very often, one of the things is, there's a lot of shelfware out there in terms of software. It's a major responsibility of IT and the organisation to drive the and tell people how to use these technologies.
Yes, when you're sort of attempting to develop this sort of thing, is it can it be sort of fatal if you don't get all of these, or can we just muddle through? Can we continue to muddle through, Tim? Do you think?
Do you mean in terms of the psychological?
In the psychological attributes, because we take in IT, then generally speaking, you build until it's good enough, and then you sort of fix here and there. Can we do the same thing? Can we half-build the personality of a mobile worker and then let them sort out the rest for themselves?
Well, I think we've got some interesting the other side of this study, which is, I think, on the next slide. It is about the management. And you're absolutely right. Most people are going to say, well, I've got the staff I've got. Some of them don't have those attributes. So there's some really interesting, we've got a link at the end of the presentation to this, but about the ideal way to manage these type of workers. So setting high-level objectives is important. You're going to be interacting with them much less than you would have been if you're all sitting around in one office. So make every interaction count. And in our opinion, having much richer forms of communications are important. Video is becoming much more readily available, much more cost-effective. Broadband speeds are getting much better, so you can have high-quality video interactions now. So it's a matter of treating people as individuals, being very tuned in with their own personal needs and their own personality traits, making every interaction count. Don't avoid team building. So you will have to do more team building activities, maybe more social events, get people together. Because what we've also found is that when you first try and build a team, especially if it's multicultural, you can't really do it just by electronic means in terms of, texting, emailing. Things can be misinterpreted on email very easily, especially across cultures.
Especially with people who've got English as a second language or are using their second language.
Exactly right. So the studies within the study as well, it's also found that what's important, when you're trying to build a multicultural team especially, it's really important to have face-to-face interactions or high-definition video interactions at the beginning, build the trust, and preferably face-to-face meetings with a team dinners and what have you afterwards, or team events. Then, once the trust is there, you can move to lower context forms of communication like instant messaging, texting, phone calls. But it's really important to get the video, or face-to-face meetings happening at the beginning. And you can develop competencies within individuals as well.
And I think that's a vital point, because I've spoken with quite a few companies where once they move to a much more virtual team-based approach, which is pretty common in a lot of organisations now that are distributed, quite often where people are doing man management, it's remote. And that's something that long-term is not good for the career building or the morale of staff. So it's important, as Tim says, to have actual face-to-face time where it's necessary, at least once a year if you're managing someone, to see them properly and get to know them. Otherwise, you're managing at arm's length and there's no real career development. The other thing, of course, is there's a changed dynamic in many buildings, because it used to be you would have a water cooler or coffee machine and conversations would happen. That's not really happening anymore. So, particularly in a hot desking situation where people don't know each other, so companies we've seen now, particularly where they have a fairly large office, are changing their restaurants and changing their coffee break areas to make it more amenable to mixing and chatting and talking, for example.
Because there's also the point made in the questions there that when you do have that hot desking, before we had teams that sat together and you could look across your little divide there and there's the person that you need to speak to all the time. Now they might be in, they might be in Milton Keynes, they might be in San Jose, they might just actually be on the other side of the office. It doesn't have that convenience of getting a team working together. Hard to replicate that using technology.
Well, one of the things we've been doing is, as I say, deploying video, either on a laptop or many people now have dedicated video units at home. So, in fact, some of my colleagues leave their video bridge open all day, so that they're there.
Stories there.
Somebody can jump into the video room just to say hello, and we can interact. And one of the other interesting things we've been playing around with is we've got a virtual coffee room. So on the floor that I sit in Bedfont Lakes, in the coffee room there's a large plasma screen linked into the Amsterdam coffee area. So you can just walk up to say, hi, how are you? So you can kind of interact with people in other offices, which is quite an interesting experiment we've been doing.
I find it a bit freaky, actually, I have to say. This is
your coffee down.
This is a company that doesn't have to pay for its own networks,
Amsterdam
isn't it?
coffee is so much better than the UK.
It's like voluntary CCTV. Andy Buss, tell me about this. You say, are you really suggesting that we should be doing our work on Facebook?
No, but what's really happening is we're seeing new information sources coming to light, and people are using them because they're finding their internal systems haven't kept up with what they're trying to do. So we mentioned earlier the problem of finding someone with the right skills in an organisation. And quite often, company directories that have been put in place don't have that kind of information for locating people. So what do people do? They either turn to their network of people to ask who's got the skills, or you can even search through your own company for people in the company working on certain projects or that have it listed in their profile, for example. So what's happening is people are often using things like LinkedIn to find out more about the colleagues they work with than the company is providing them with.
So should companies just abandon then their whole internal directory efforts then, Tim? Andy, do you get that one?
It's about trying to make them work and integrate both with the existing social media and information, as well as having the flexibility to provide this type of information and location and direction to the staff, because if they are searching and can't find it, they will turn to other sources.
You have to say, I used to have to spend ages keeping up with my contacts database and everything like that. It was always out of date, it was always rubbish, and it was always wrong. And then you get with something like LinkedIn. loads of people asking to connect to you, and you might think, I don't really want to, but I mean, fine, it'll happen, and then it turns out that they're useful, and you've got all these people, and they actually keep their own contact details up to date. So it does work. Just if you want to connect to me, then just send a request. I shouldn't have done that.
What's really interesting as well is a lot of devices like phones these days are starting to integrate these for you.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in advance of what's happening, for example, on the Exchange server. So one of my phones can look at Twitter activity, LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as your Outlook contact details, and bring it all together in one place for you.
But we are courting disaster if we're asking people to do work on Facebook, for example. So let's have a look at some little bit more formal structure around these sort of.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that Facebook is the number. People spend more time on Facebook than any other application on the web today. And according to Gartner, more than 50%, sorry to use another analyst firm, more than 50% of enterprises are now starting to deploy social software applications inside the enterprise. So this would be a Facebook type capability, or a YouTube, for corporate announcements and training, Twitter, so microblogging. So these applications are finding their way into the enterprise now, and there are enterprise-grade versions. I mean, the market's still quite early, but there's many vendors entering this market.
One of the difficulties we find, though, is that it has to be properly structured and integrated, because one of our favourite sayings is the value of social media is like the inverse of Metcalfe's law. The value decreases with the square of the number of different systems you have to sign into and work with. So keeping it simple and as few as possible and integrate them is the aim.
You must laugh and laugh down at Freeform Dynamics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, honestly. But now, one of the other things that lurks in the background of this, Tim, is that you've got to get the network straight that's underneath this sort of thing.
Yeah.
You've been talking about some of the fancy things you've got, and I've made fun of them, but they might well be useful, but they'll definitely not be useful if you haven't got your infrastructure underneath, and that's going to mean a lot more network bandwidth. You're going to mean sort of connectivity to people working remotely, and try to secure some of that and make it better. And it might also mean sort of, you might have to sort of pay for people to upgrade their connections to the home and everything like that, mightn't you?
Yeah, well, I think what's really important is taking an architectural approach to this. And you say about bandwidth. I mean, one of the things we're all about is managing that bandwidth and providing intelligent networking, so you can see what the application is doing, see what type of media you're trying to put across the network. So is it a real-time protocol, like voice, for example, or video, and being able to optimize and tune the network so that you can deliver high-quality voice and video. And you can optimize bandwidth, you can do compression techniques, you can do network admission control, so that if the network's congested, you can reroute the call around the public switch phone network, etc., these kind of things. But what's really important is, a foundation of a network that's aware, that's secure, and that you can manage, and can support your workers wherever they are. So, yes, in some cases, you will need, as you start moving into video, to ensure that you've got a decent upload speed on your network at home. But some of the technologies that we've been building mean we have things like adaptive codecs, so that if you don't have the bandwidth, if you come home from work, if you've been in the office and you go to your home office, if there's a lot of people on the broadband network in your home area, the video can degrade gracefully to give you a lower quality experience because the network is busy. So all these kind of techniques are really important to ensure that the best experience is provided to the user depending on the network conditions. If they're in a hotel room, you might have a bandwidth constraint. So, drop down to maybe just a voice interaction. If you've got high bandwidth, then you move up to high quality and even high definition video across the network. So.
And there's a brief one I want to put you on this, because Richard was asking the question about appropriate levels of encryption. This comes into building the holistic environment, as we're calling it, as well there, doesn't it? That some things just naturally have to be encrypted if they're whizzing about outside the firewall.
When you're looking at corporate communications, you've always got to consider security. And these days, I think there are basically pretty secure industry standards like AES 256-bit encryption standards, using things like either IPsec, VPNs and SSL to connect and establish secure tunnels, for example. But it also comes down to making sure, for example, that laptops have encryption. And we know from our research that very few companies these days have actually taken that step, despite the fact that disk encryption is readily available and not very expensive. So we've also got to treat our priorities right. We're not yet tackling some of the base security issues as it is, so we've got to make sure everything is addressed. And just coming back to the point of an architectural approach, I think there's two things that naturally fall out of this. One is, if you do have the luxury of taking an architectural approach, that's great, but not many companies do have the opportunity. So you need to have a strategic vision that includes a bit of architectural thinking, but also be able to break it down into achievable steps that can be done with the available budget, time and resources. So identify what are the important things to the business, to put those in place first, and then move to integrating more and more over time.
What are those things?
So you'd be looking at, well, is video important to you, or is IP communications the most important? So video's great, it's nice, it adds a lot, but it's not essential, for example. So if your budget only stretches so far and you don't have IP voice communications, that's probably where the money should go initially, and then voice follow on after. So it's about prioritising and getting the right things. So supporting, for example, the right set of devices that the employees want to use and that you want to be effective for the business. So it's identifying discrete parts of this architecture that you can put in place and develop it over time is one area. The other is there's a question of IT budgets, and a lot of companies have run IT budgets based on the old way of working and are now trying to shoehorn a lot of the new technology and business process enhancement that comes through this into the old level of IT budgets, which, to be frank, are flat or declining. So there is a big problem trying to take these new technologies and implement them effectively with the old budget structure. This is really a business operations issue, not an IT issue. This is about enhancing the business. So
fundamentally, this comes down to, Tim, if you answer this one sort of quickly, fundamentally it comes down to the fact that a lot of people have been kicked out of the office so the companies can save money. And, and this, when she's talking about some of the things you're talking about, you're not going to be saving money. You might get people working more efficiently. It's not going to be cheaper.
Well, I think you end up, with some of the figures I've shared with you, you end up with people being more productive and also improving their work-life balance. I mean, it depends.
But the investment comes first, that's the thing.
Well,
if the budget's not there.
Yeah, there will be, obviously, IT investments, but a lot of the benefits, this is where we get into some tricky debates. I mean, there are hard and fast ROI benefits of things like IP telephony for saving call costs and what have you, but a lot of the other benefits are soft benefits, which, can be difficult to justify, and, we've got quite a lot of stories and case studies that we've created around this area, but, yeah, it is always difficult to go to a board and talk about soft benefits when you're trying to justify the investment.
But they're not even giving the money for the hard benefits, yeah. That's the thing. Now, let's have a little bit longer, because a couple of people are asking about, what they should be doing. So I know that you've put together your 4 kind of attributes.
Yeah.
Of that. So, first of all, mobile.
Yeah, so our view is the workspace of the future. I mean, and as Andy says, you can pick these bits off piece by piece you can get on this journey quite quickly, so I don't want to sort of put people off. But, mobile is the first attribute. So the workplace of the future will be mobile, and it will be across any device. So you need to consider collaborative tools that will work across all the major operating systems, PC, Mac, Android, Windows environments, Blackberries, iPhones, etc. So mobile, and could be a tablet, it could be a mobile device, could be any of these environments. So that's the first thing.
Well, as a bonus straight away, because some of the sort of workflow applications and things like that people have been using are really based around sort of PCs and laptops.
Yeah, and there are ways to get around that through things like virtualizing applications, so being able to run them in a VDI if necessary.
Or on your phone.
Well, you can get an application that just shows you the screen and you can interact, for example. There are ways around it, but this is fundamentally the new reality. And it's about, when you're looking at new applications, making sure that they are catering for this so that you get a good experience.
Okie doke. Yeah, it's the next thing. Social. What's social?
So
Hang on, we're back on Facebook.
Yeah. So the second thing, as I was saying, a lot of organisations are looking at deploying social networking technologies within the enterprise. So our vision is that you come into the office in the morning, you're not looking at an intranet or your email, you're looking at a social networking environment. So your information comes to you, your news feeds, the teams you're working with, your buddy list. You can click on your buddy, talk to them, or video them within the same environment. You can share documents with them using web conferencing. You can IM them, or you can use all of these different communication technologies at the click of a button within your workspace. It has your documents there, your project teams. You can download videos for company announcements from your chief executive or training videos. So our vision is we have this social networking environment where you build teams that you work with, not necessarily in your organizational structure. So for me, for example, I'm in collaboration, I'm in marketing, so I'm in those two communities, and I'm in Europe as well. So I can join those three separate communities and get news feeds coming to me and information right across those organizational structures. So in the future, one day, this will replace companies' intranets. It will be a social environment where people form their own communities and stay in touch, can find expertise, find like-minded individuals within the company to help them do their jobs.
I'm not 100% certain what the difference is between that and an intranet.
Well, it's much more of a community. So an intranet is more of a sort of static information, whereas this is and it's built around organisational structures. An intranet. So you'll have a marketing page, you might have a sales page, you might have a technical support page, a corporate communications page. But within the social environment, you're building your own communities and structures, and it's much more interactive. And from there, you can launch out to real-time communications like video, voice, IM, from within one environment.
Question is, when we're talking about consumers, so they're using email less because they're using Facebook-type technologies more. So is this going to come to companies now that people will end up using email less? It'd be nice if I got a few, we all got less emails with 400 people CC'd on them, and instead there was just an announcement somewhere. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen in the early deployments of this social software internally and with some of our customers dramatic reductions in email as a result. In our IT department, they saw I can't recall the exact number, but dramatic reductions in email because everybody was communicating and collaborating on a project within this environment. So, certainly I'm not saying email is going away, but these technologies, and if you think about the next generation workforce, I heard a statistic the other day that 50% of the world's population in a couple of years' time will be under 25 years old. And, the vast majority of those people will never own a CD in their lives. And the majority will not be using email, And I look at my daughters, they're on Facebook, Twitter. They never, ever send emails. So as these people come into the workplace, they're going to be used to working in this social environment. So that's why there's a massive interest in IT companies, like us and others, building social networking products within businesses.
Yeah, and I think this will start to steer where things like email servers go in the future, about integrating all the different information sources together, taking the unstructured, very dynamic type of collaboration that we've just seen and combining that with a much more structured intranet where you can find things more easily, for example. So it gives a lot more flexibility. But again, our research of the Reg readership shows that email is highly integrated into business processes, for example.
I was going to say, because, what do we do in the short term? Because you'll end up with two different messaging systems. Yeah. Some people working off their social thing, and, and other people working off their email because it's more sort of structured, and that's what they're used to.
Well, I think it is about finding the balance. It's actually, in many ways, it's a good thing.
No. It can't be about finding a balance, because what I'm saying is you've got two different conversations going on.
You do. Right. Email is typically very much integrated into a lot of business processes, and it's unlikely that that's going to change soon. So when communications are to do with authorizations or to do with the way the company operates, particularly, email will still be very relevant, and we need to make sure that the workers who are using it are actually trained up and familiar and are using it. So that's one challenge of, say, taking the new social generation in, is getting them used to a bit more structured communication and following policy and process, because they're actually quite free spirits coming in, and it will take some time to get them used to following
Take some time to knock that out of them.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges.
Remarkably
of
quickly,
training.
actually, if you're just joining the workforce now, believe me.
And but the other side is these team collaborations are vitally important. And they used to result in email overload. Now they're in threaded streams. They're much easier to search and quantify and put in place and targeted. So there is different levels of communication that are right, and you have to use the right tool for the right job.
Right.
But it does make our life a bit harder going forward.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. On the visual thing, we have a question from Rajendra, who was saying that their company is using video, but found the results disappointing. Instead of using Microsoft Communication, found results disappointing just because of this variety of different connections and things like this. So we really have to be careful with this visual idea that we don't run before we walk.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, some companies would have you believe that the network and managing what's going on end to end is not important, and you can just do it in the application. But certainly in our experience, you've got to take account of the network. It's just, and that's where you'll get poor experiences. I mean, when we work remotely, we've implemented routers that do traffic shaping on the back of your broadband at home, so that we can get high quality video, within the network. And I think one of the other things is about adoption. I mean, so quality is critically important, and the network's got to be taken care of to run video. I mean, there was a recent statistic I saw that 50% of desktops will be video-enabled within 5 years. So that'll be 200 million video-enabled desktops in the world, and 90% of internet traffic will be video within the next couple of years.
And of course, almost all phones and tablets now have front and rear cameras.
Exactly right. So for example, we've built web conferencing for the iPad with front and rear facing cameras, so you can get on a web conferencing session. Well, obviously from a PC, but also from an iPad, so you can have that video interaction through a software as a service capability, where you just pay per user per month. So to the earlier point, you can get on board with some of these video technologies very, very cost effectively if you're using a cloud-based service, such as WebEx, and there's others out there. But visual, that's the other attribute. Video will become really, really important, both for downloading and streaming of content for educational purposes, for example, but also interactions using video on the desktop. But I would argue that the poor experience is because you haven't, you need to take account of the network.
And also, I think a lot of the codecs haven't been that great in the past as well. They've been choppy, very blocky, and often quite laggy as well, and that's very distracting. It has to be a good experience.
Memo to Cisco on that one. Yeah, now you're in control of a big bit of this. Yeah,
and Microsoft with Skype and all sorts as well.
Well, that's it. Now, virtual is your last category.
Yeah.
Here.
So the workspace of the future, we believe, will be virtual as well. Now, there's two elements to this. There's the kind of server side, if you like, and then the client side. So, in terms of virtual, that covers really virtualization of data centers, where we believe that 60% of server workloads will be virtualized on virtual hardware within 3 years, according to some of the analyst figures, and 20% of desktops will become virtualized within 3 years. So this covers the area where you may virtualize your own data center, or you may buy things as a cloud service. So, the major applications we see in the market are, Salesforce.com or WebEx, where these are simply purchased on a price per user per month basis. So the cloud is becoming more and more important. And then on the desktop side, as Andy already mentioned, you've got VXI, so you've got VMware, Citrix, Wise. And one of the things we're trying to do is, it's very, very difficult today or what's largely incompatible is collaboration tools and a virtual desktop.
Yeah.
But one of the things we think we've got an answer to is working very closely with VMware, for example, is we built an architecture where you can run video within a virtual desktop environment, and there's some products on the market now that allow you to do that. So you can get the benefit of having VDI, but also collaboration in one single thing.
We're in danger of turning into a different regcast, but it's one of the problems that's holding back the virtual desktop, isn't it? That you just basically have to give up all this stuff that people are saying is really useful for the future.
You do need a rich experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But so, that's for another time, because I want you to have enough time. Just talk quickly. There's a couple of Cisco applications, things that you're using, just for people who say, it's collaboration stuff he's talking about. No one does that.
Well, these are just kind of examples, really, of some of the things that we've been doing with internally and with our customers. So this is something called Cisco Quad that you can see on the screen. And this is pretty much, I described it earlier, your single workspace environment. Internally, we call it IWE, which is a name made up by our IT department, Integrated Workforce Experience.
Revisit that one.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Get marketing involved.
I think, marketing should have been involved in that. Integrated Workforce Experience. Yeah, and this is this concept of this is where you go when you come in the morning. As I was saying earlier, your information, your news feeds, your community is all there in one place. And this is, we've got some really interesting stories, actually, and case studies around this starting to emerge, where people are able to find expertise or find other people working on projects they didn't even know existed in the company. So some of these discovery of information and resources they never knew was there. So there's some quite interesting early findings from this type of technology.
What about the next one, Jabber?
Yeah, well, this is something else we put in here just to say, well, don't get scared off by all this stuff. You don't have to, go whole hog with all of these technologies in one go. It can be very simple with things like Jabber, which is something you can either deploy yourself or you can buy per user per month. You could start with a small pilot. And this will give you instant messaging, voice, video, and document sharing, so web collaboration from within one single client application. And it doesn't matter what your users are using. There's versions of this for PC, Mac, tablets, and the top 4 leading smartphone vendors. So it's one application. You can download it and you can chat, voice, video, share documents from within this one Jabber application. And as I was saying, don't think you've got to go whole hog across your company. Start with a small team, and you can start using these tools with minimal investment.
Andy Boss, you Jabber?
I don't, I must say, but it is an interesting tool that brings things together. So
yeah, but it's now. Let's have a look. Let's give it enough. Let's have a look at our blobs diagram here, because what we've been talking about during all of this is being selective, being selective about what you choose to do first. But also being selective about, there's no point in forcing technology onto people. Go home and use this. That's not going to work, is it?
Exactly right. And you need to, the first stage of any of this really is to profile your workers. It sounds obvious, really. But you may end up, depending on your organisation, you may end up with, you don't want to get too many categories, but you may end up with 5 or 6 different categories. So if you were to say, a company that was selling products into the market, you might have a field sales force, you might have a marketing department, you'll have executives, you might have field support engineers, your finance department, etc. So kind of look at the profile of workers that you're going to have. And then what we've tried to do here, just as an example, is map the various mobility and collaboration tools onto those workers. So, for example, if you're a field worker, then you may not need a physical IP phone, but you may want a dual mode phone. So your iPhone works on wireless when you come into the office, works on the mobile when you go out of the office. If you're working in a warehouse, you might need a mobile phone with a barcode scanner on it, for example. If you're a knowledge worker, you're going to want document sharing, video. So all we're saying really is, obviously we can't do this for you, but we can provide advice, is look at your job functions, look at the technology, and try and build a map like this in the first stage of your planning to see which tools you're going to deploy to people. And then, obviously, you won't be buying more software than you actually need.
Yeah, and this helps with the point we made earlier about it's good to have the architectural approach and knowing what the full solution is, but this helps to prioritise each of the achievable steps, and you can build on it.
There's just a couple of questions on the back of this as we move towards the close here. But James is talking about, do we use this to sort of wrap in now communications with customers, as part of a sort of like a sales thing? You've got these collaborative tools. Are we talking about them mostly as internal kind of tools to help?
Actually, that is a great prompt, actually, for the last slide. I know you're in charge here, Tim.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm not really in charge.
But there's a great example here where there's two things to say here, really. This company in Germany is very innovative, Wengler. They make these photoelectric sensors. Don't ask me to explain how they work, but 500 person company and 50,000 customers. And what they've done is they've linked all of these a lot of these internal tools we've been talking about with their contact centre or call centre. So when inquiries come into the organisation, very often the customer needs an answer from the field service engineer or the sales guy who might be out on the road. So they put these mobile clients onto those field workers. So the call centre agent can chat, through IM with those field service people, put the call through if they need to, so they can try and answer the customer inquiry first time. And they've had some tremendous efficiency savings, as you can see on the slide there, by doing this. They've also implemented video, so they've virtualised their training using WebEx. So instead of flying people all around Germany to come in for training courses, they're doing that remotely. And they've also been using a bit of video, actually, in their design processes to get people face-to-face, engineers designing new products linked with sales. So the customer service part is really important to be able to link the whole enterprise together to try and handle customer inquiries more quickly. And the second part, which we haven't really touched on, is social is coming into the contact centre as well. So it's becoming more of a customer collaboration environment. Yeah. And some of the tools on the market today, one thing we have called Social Miner, you can listen in to Facebook, blogs, RSS feeds, you can listen in to Twitter, and you can hear what customers are saying about your company. So that could be used either to try and resolve customer complaints, or if somebody's got an issue about your particular piece of technology, or if somebody's looking for a new product. Some of the US department stores have been using it. Somebody's looking for a product, they can say, oh, there's one in stock at this particular store. So we're just starting to work out how to use these things. Some of the football teams in the Premier League today using it to interact with fans, to listen to what the fans are saying, interact back with them. So social is becoming important in the customer contact area as well.
But yeah, we're opening up a whole new set
that could be another Regcast.
It could be another Regcast. You can come back. You've been well behaved. It's been, it's been overwhelmingly a good experience. Yes, but there are a lot of things like that, and one of the lessons of that is if you don't like your job at the moment, don't go on Facebook and complain about it, because they'll know.
Well, it's a pretty good solution to not liking your job anymore.
How you get out of it quick. We got a whole bunch of links for you here. So rather than just scribble them down quickly, download the slides and you can have another look at the stuff, because we're coming to the end. Final question, quick one to wrap up for you, Andy Buss. Is 4G going to dig us out of some of our problems with getting information at the right time and in the right place and everything like that? Is it going to solve everything?
It will help.
But not just yet.
It's a way off, and 3G is only really just becoming widely available now, so it will be a decade or so. But we've got Wi-Fi, we've got 3G.
Yeah, so for who asked the question about that, don't pin all your hopes on that one for the future. But guys, we run out of time. We've got to finish. So it's been terrific, Tim. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your help. Andy Buss, thanks for all your help as well.
A pleasure.
And thank you for coming along and watching our Regcast. Let us know what you thought of it. Let us know what you'd like to see in future. If we find any questions we haven't properly answered, we'll answer them for you, because we're good that way. So I've been Tim Phillips, and from the Register. Goodbye.